Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special late evening episode of Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Scribe. Joining me today is a fellow author and content creator whose debut novel series, The Three Kingdoms Chronicles, is in the works, with book two coming out on March 15th, which is a very special period in Chinese history for me. Anyone who knows me, I love history, and the Three Kingdoms era in Chinese history is my absolute favorite. And joining us all the way from the other side of the world, Baptiste Pinson Wu. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Gabriel. Very nice to be on your channel slash podcast.
Thank you, Baptiste. So before we go into the details regarding your series of books, what can you tell us about yourself? How did you become an author, and what sort of put you on this path to become a writer?
Well, the thing is, I've always loved writing, but for a long time it was just for fun. I would write stories, just here and there since high school. And I think the first time I told myself, what I really want to write was back in 2016. I was watching this episode of the TV show Vikings, and
Ooh.
so a very good TV show, at least for quite some time. And there is one battle in season 3 or 4, I forget. Really, not even a big battle, not so important. But as I watched this battle, I was thinking to myself, I would love to write battles like this in a book. So after this episode, I bought a bunch of historical fiction books like Cornwell, Christian, Robert Law, and all of this.
Yes.
So some of the best. I didn't know they were the best. I bought those just because of their popularity. And then, so I love those books, and I decided, yeah, you know what, it's time to write more seriously. Yeah. So that's when I started.
Awesome. Yeah, you listed some of my favorite authors. Those are some of my favorite historical fiction authors of all
Mm.
time. Bernard Cornwell, I have almost all of his series of the Saxon Chronicles, as well
Mhm.
as uh, Agincourt. I haven't read any of the Nathaniel Sharp series, but I have seen the
Me neither.
film
Mm.
or the TV shows. But it's a fantastic series. So after doing your research into sort of like how you want to like construct your voice and your
Mhm.
overall narrative style, what made you want to pursue the Three Kingdoms era in Chinese history as opposed to any other era in history?
Well, to be to be completely open about this, I mean, Three Kingdoms is by far my favorite historical, uh, era period. It is Three Kingdoms of China, so it's like third century China, late
Yeah.
second, and most of third century is an amazing period of history. But it's not the first book I wrote. I mean, I started writing this book uh, back in 2016, 17. I wrote the prologue, a few chapters, and I was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough as a writer for
Mm,
this amazing story. So I left it on the side for like nearly 6 years. And
wow.
in the meantime, I wrote 6 or 7 books, and most of them are actually about Vikings or
Mm,
Scandinavian mythology. So they will come.
nice.
I will publish them in the future, but I wanted something different to publish at first because there are already
Right.
so many good Viking novels, Dark Ages Europe books, and all of this. So I wanted I wanted my first published book to be different. So I was like, you know what? Let's go back to
Right.
this original project of ancient China.
Awesome. That's actually really cool. And yeah, I love the Three Kingdoms era in China. In fact, I've seen Red Cliff, which is probably the
Yeah.
best drama surrounding the Three Kingdoms period because it has some of the
Mm.
most famous historical figures: Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Cao Cao, all the famous individuals, leaders, warlords during that time. It's such a very fascinating
Mm.
period. So, how would you say initially starting this off, and as you said, put it on a break for 6 years and then returning it? Did you kind of have a better idea of how you
Mm.
want to approach the story?
Yeah, absolutely. Like at the very beginning, so that's before I really got into reading dozens upon dozens of historical fiction novels. I wanted a multi-point of view um, novel. I wanted to write a novel from three angles so that would merge into those three kingdoms later on. But then, as I read more and more historical fiction, I realized the ones I loved the most were first-person point of view. So one main
Mm,
central character, and usually it's the same idea which I used: old man telling his life, starting from his childhood. And this old man is became obviously an amazing warrior.
right.
So I use this idea for my series as well, which you can find in Cornwell, Jazz Christian, and all the others quite often.
Right.
So yeah, reading a lot of historical fiction made me change the way I wanted to write that story a lot.
Yeah, and I definitely have to agree. Those guys, when it comes to like writing very great characters in these
Mm,
very complex times, it is very, very fascinating. So let's actually talk about the first book you wrote about, which, if I'm not mistaken, is called the Yellow Sky Revolt. So what
yep.
can you tell us about that book?
So Yellow Sky Revolt is, I think, one of my first reviews on Goodreads nailed it completely
Hmm.
by saying that this book is a setter. So this book is setting the tone, the pace for the next books in the series. This series is going to be at least 10 books long. There's going to be a
Wow.
couple of extra novellas and spin-offs as well, but the main series is going to be 10 books long. And so this book starts from the point of view of the main character, who is Liao Hua. Liao Hua is not a very, very famous character in the Three Kingdoms, at least because of the way the legend has been told and retold for the last 2,000 years.
Right.
Historically, he was probably quite important, but the legend got it, kind of put him on the side a little bit. Anyway, so as he
Okay.
tells the story, he's old. His kingdom just was defeated, so they just lost this war that lasted almost 80 years, and he's telling his life to a scribe that whose task is to record this amazing
Mm.
history. And so, of course, he goes back to the very beginning. What started this Three Kingdoms War? And so we go back to his childhood as a peasant, a boy, a farmer's son, in the middle of the empire of well, it's not called Chinese, but the Chinese Empire, and how he got swooped into a peasant slash religious rebellion that
Mhm.
really triggered it's often regarded as the trigger to this war, that the civil war
Right.
that would start later, is this yellow turban uprising. So and this kid from his farm, so he joins the rebellion, and despite himself becomes the symbol of the rebellion.
Mm.
So that's really the story of this rebellion that triggered one of the longest civil war in history, and one of the most violent as well, because it lasted, yeah, almost 100 years.
Yeah. And when you wrote that book and got it published, um, were you kind of nervous of how people would take this story? Because it's a very romanticized piece
Mm.
of not just Chinese history, but just ancient history. And we are kind of a little apprehensive about how people would, approach this and thinking that this is a first time
Mm.
novel.
Yeah, no, I was a little bit nervous. First, as you can hear, I'm not writing in my native tongue, so I'm French to begin with.
Right.
So, I'm not 100% confident about everything I write in English, even though editors have been over it, of course. So the language was one thing, but yeah, no, of course, the story itself. So you have a lot of people who are really in love with the legend and don't want
Right.
people, like, especially for example in China, they don't want the story to be changed so much, right?
Hmm.
There was an amazing TV show made in 2010. You have a bunch of TV shows about the Three Kingdoms,
Yes.
so a bunch of Chinese TV shows, and usually they stick to the novel, the original novel, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. They stick to it very closely, and if you change a line, they will not be happy, right? Now, in 2010, they made this TV show that changed a bunch of things, and I found it so beautiful because of that. But a lot of people didn't like it because exactly
Right.
because they changed some things. Now, obviously, on my side, I wanted to completely change it, remove a lot of information, include others. It is as much as possible historically accurate, but I was nervous of how people would either disapprove of the me choosing history versus the story, or the other way around, the story versus the history.
Right. That actually is really true because the Three Kingdoms is probably the most beloved story in Chinese history. And yeah, I
Hmm.
completely agree. If you change that story that's been beloved for so long, people are going to have an issue with it. I actually had the fortune of traveling abroad during my undergrad and actually
Hmm.
going to the shrine of the famous brothers in arms, Liu Bei,
Mm.
Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei. It's quite a very surreal place. It's a very beautiful temple, and
So,
everyone pays respects to that. So you do not want to like mess up these very, very um
mm,
important people. But like as you said, it's like balancing like the story of the Three Kingdoms with the history of China at that time.
mm.
So I would imagine research was probably a nightmare trying to get everything correct.
I actually love this part. I didn't think I would love researching that much at first. Now, what happened is like I've been reading history books and essays about the Three Kingdoms for a quite long time, maybe 10 years, but I didn't really do it from with a professional mindset. So a
Right.
lot of information I didn't retain. So like when I decided, you know what, I'm gonna write this book and publish it by the end of this year. So that was last year. uh, I really went to libraries. I asked friends of mine who are in university, like, send me everything you get, everything you have in your libraries about Three Kingdoms. And I ended up having like 60 books, more or less. Some are just like 20, 30 pages. They are just essays. Some are like 1,000 pages. And I went through them in a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and while keeping as much as possible. And there was a lot of discoveries that I would have missed in this novel um, if I didn't do those research, right? Now, the thing is, there is also a lot of details from the history that contradict the legend.
Right.
So there you have a choice to make. Do you follow the history? Do you stick to the legend? So sometimes I had to make some hard choices, knowing that some people would disapprove of them at the end of the day. Yeah.
Nice. And is that kind of almost how you approach the sequel to Yellow Sky Revolt, Heroes of Chaos, which comes
Mhm.
out in March?
Yeah, so I mean the story just in Heroes of Chaos, we pick the story right from the end of Yellow Sky Revolt. It's just 5 minutes after. So there is no break, and the thing is I'm plotting my books quite in a detailed fashion. So I didn't have to redo a lot of research because all the research was done for the book from book one to book four. Everything is plotted to down to tiny details. So I have most of the informations I needed. This is why after book four, I will take a small break in order to research the next arc of the story and so on and so on. So yeah, I did a lot of research for the first part of the story, which is 25 years long, something like this.
Wow.
So yeah, Yellow Sky Revolt is 6 years, by the way. It's just
Right.
it's a story spanning over 6 years. Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool.
Mm.
So, when you initially started writing your series of books and this idea of this story, did you kind of have like a reader in mind, or did you kind of like
Mm.
write for like yourself, as some authors do?
No, I actually had two readers in mind, two kinds of readers. The first kind would be people like you and me who
Hmm.
love already the Three Kingdoms of China, people who know the story more or less, either through video games or movies or TV
Hmm.
shows or the original romance of the Three Kingdoms. So I wrote the Yellow Sky Revolt and the next ones with them in mind. So by peppering the novel with Easter eggs, let's call them like this, Easter eggs, like a lot of information that they might pick on, like, oh wow, that's a nice wink to what happens in the movie, what happens in the romance, what happened for real in history, and all of this.
Ooh,
And
okay.
so it's really good. They are like I stopped counting, but probably a good 100 over the books I've written so far, and not everyone has found them yet. So that's my first reader. The second reader would be people who don't know anything about China. So, and this is the reader that I really focused on the most by
Mm.
making this book as friendly as discovery friendly as possible. So people who don't know China or this specific moment of Chinese history, should still be able to appreciate, and maybe that's my hope, fall in love with this period of time. Yeah. So my
Wow.
two readers.
That's actually pretty cool, and that's actually the very similar answer I get from a lot of my interviewees. That
Mm.
yes, you have the reader that is very familiar with the material, but you also have that other reader which is not familiar, which is that's the market. That's right there. The
Exactly.
reader that is not well versed in the subject, but will become well versed. And what was the overall? You talked briefly about this, but what was the initial feedback like for your first book, and how did that make you feel seeing those initial positive responses?
I mean, the reviews so far have been amazing. Now the number of reviews is still quite limited. Whether
Right.
Goodreads or Amazon, it's about like a couple of dozen here and there. But the quality of those reviews is really good. Some of them wrote like half my novel basically in a review. So some people have made videos about Yellow Sky Revolt, and I'm really humbled to see the response, how people appreciated this story. uh, I'm very happy to say that both sides of the readership seem to really enjoy it. So you have people that I talk with very often that know the Three Kingdoms very well, and I really liked it, and appreciated the effort here. And the other side would be the people who don't know about China or the Three Kingdoms, and they all say like it's very easy to get into. There is nothing stopping you from appreciating this tale, even if you're not familiar with this
Right.
particular culture. Now I must point one particular review that made me very happy. I sent this
Ooh,
book.
okay.
I sent this Yellow Sky Revolt to an historian in Australia named Rafe de Crespigny. So Rafe de Crespigny, he's the greatest specialist on that era. I would say. So he's a sinologist and a specialist of Han Dynasty and Three Kingdoms. And yeah, he sent me a reply back by email saying that he absolutely liked it, and he hopes it will be quite a success. And we exchanged a bit, and yeah, he gave me a lot of very positive notes. So if Rev de Crespigny like this book, that means people who appreciate this time of Chinese history will as well, or might as well.
Wow, that's actually really, really
Mm.
cool. I always had a similar kind of feedback with a professor of mine during my graduate studies. I was working on an alternate history story
Mhm.
entitled Amnetus, Son of Persia. And it follows a character, a Spartan, during this kind of twist at the Battle of 300, where
Mhm.
instead the Spartans ally with the Persians. And at the Battle of Plataea, you actually have the Spartans and the Persians fighting against the Athenians and the rest of the Greek coalition. And what you have is almost all of Greece, save for not Alexandria, but Macedonia, is under Persian influence.
Yeah.
And it's this whole hero's journey of this character who now was the son of an elite Spartan warrior who's now elevated to bodyguard of the Persian royalty, which is Artaxerxes
Xerxes.
the first. And I shared this with my professor, who was a classical antiquities historian, and he said, if you do this right, this is probably one of the best stories of Greek history, alternate history as it is, but alternate history in general that I've ever read, because you've nailed the culture, you've nailed this history, because it is plausible in a sense of what
Mm.
possibly may have happened. And hearing that people was like,
Yeah.
wow,
When,
that's
when
that's awesome.
when you hear this kind of feedback from people who know really really know what they are talking about, it feels good. It feels like an
Definitely.
accomplishment. So I made a small list of people I wanted to have quotes or approval notes over my career, and this person I mentioned, Rev de Crespigny, was definitely in that small list. So I'm very happy he's already appreciating this series. But yeah, it feels really good, I admit.
Yeah. And as you said before, you're stretching this out into a 10-book series
Mm.
with various spin-offs and novellas. That can seem pretty daunting. And I've talked with a lot of people about this and saying, making these very long series, it can get kind of intimidating. Like, how do I
Mm,
follow up on these other books? It would probably seem easier to take a break or just step away. But what is your why, Baptiste? Like, what keeps you engaged with the story that you have created? What
mm.
continues to motivate you to write?
I mean, I just love writing. It's really all there is to say
Don't
at
we
this point.
all?
Is like I love writing, but I love every part of writing. I love plotting, I love editing, I love writing itself. Um, I'm very lucky on this, and I can write very easily. I'm not talking about quality here, but just I can sit, even if there is noise around, I can start writing. My kids are running in in the apartment, I can still write. So I'm really lucky like this, and I just love the whole process, and I love my characters. So I get really attached to some characters that I create, and I write as well. As much as I love writing for readers, I love for my characters. I write for my characters. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Now, sorry. You mentioned before Bernard Cornwell and a few other authors that have had a huge influence on your writing
Mm,
style and character development and all the other processes in storytelling. But growing up,
mm.
do you remember your very first author that really stuck with you? And are they still your favorite author looking back now?
Hmm. That's a bit of a difficult question because first, for a very long time, I didn't read English. I was reading
Okay.
books in French. My first love in literature, I would say, are the comics Asterix, Asterix and Obelix. It's like this French comics about the Roman invading Gaul, and
Ooh, okay.
and the Gauls resisting the Romans with a magic potion. So it's really more comedy side of comics. But that's where my love for history started. Uh,
Oh, okay.
Now, the first novel that really stuck with me, I would say, is Stephen King's Green Mile. Green Miles? Green Mile? I forgot if there is an S or not in English. So this is the first novel because I watched the movie and I loved the movie, and I wanted to read the book. When I learned there was a book, I wanted to read it, and I remember loving the book even more than the movie, and that's when I started reading nonstop. After that, there was a reader after, I mean, novel after novel forever.
Wow, that's actually really cool. And sorry, but now another question is, what book would you say has been a big inspiration to your whole writing process? So if you had to pick
Hmm.
one book, be a French book or a book in English of any genre, what book would you say has probably had the biggest impact on you?
Uh, by far, I mean, not by far, but yeah, yeah, no, still by far, Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles. So that's a trilogy. That's not one book. Sorry about this, but this is, I don't know, for most historical fiction writers I talk to, this is the holy grail. This book,
Yeah.
everyone loves it. I love it even more than the Saxon stories or the Last Kingdom. Um, this is the best, and then this is the book that made me really want to improve, because I want to one day write a book that will resonate with people the way Warlord Chronicles resonated with me. That would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
I have to agree. And for listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about with
Mm,
the Warlord Chronicles, you have to read
yeah.
it. It is probably one of the best, as Baptiste said, one of the holy grails of historical fiction. And I started reading the Warlord Chronicles when I was in middle school, and
Mm.
I instantly fell in love. And
This,
it's
yeah.
such a great series.
It is the, I mean, it's really the best. Even now that I've read hundreds of books in the same with the same idea behind, like either like Dark Ages, Ancient Rome, the Tudor, whatever you want. This one still is at the very top. It's easy to appreciate. It has, I don't know, all the details are so perfect in this book, and the characters are engaging. There is not the pace is always perfect, so you got to love it. Like the first book in historical fiction that I read was Robert Law's The Well Road. So
Oh, okay.
The Oath Sworn series, which was so good as well. but maybe a bit difficult to get into. Robert Law has this thing where the first chapter is always very difficult to grind through. Like
Okay.
Bernard Cornwell doesn't have this, and the Warlord Chronicles was so easy to appreciate. So everyone who wants to discover historical fiction should start with this one, while also understanding there will be nothing better after. So
Yeah, I have to agree. If I actually had to make another author who I would say is another great historical fiction writer, Valerio Manfredi is another great author.
so which books are you talking about here?
So Valerio Manfredi, The Last Legion, which was
Mhm.
adapted into a film,
Yeah.
the Alexander series, Spartan, the Odyssey by him, and Empire of Dragons, which is another great book, solo book of his. Another author I'd also recommend, Con Ingleton, is
Mhm.
another great author. There's a whole bunch of listeners. We can go into a huge discussion, but Bernard Cornwell is like the godfather of
Yeah.
historical fiction stories. He's just fantastic. And that actually leads into another great question. So, how do you feel? Because I know I've asked a lot of people this question. I kind of get different responses, but what's your sort of approach when someone compares, let's say, your Viking stories or your Three Kingdoms stories to like authors of the past?
Mm.
Some people will say like, "Oh, that's nice that we're being referenced, but we don't want to be considered like another, let's say, a J.K. Rowling or a uh, Bernard Cromwell or Vallejo Manfredi. We want to just be our own voices." So, have you ever come across that in your review, or if not, how would you approach that comparison?
No, I did like very early. So right after Yellow Sky Revolt was released, so last October, a few people came to me and say that looks a lot like Bernard Cornwell. Now they didn't mean the quality, right? They meant the voice maybe a little bit. The main
Right,
character, the main character. I'm not hiding it. My main character has a lot of Uthred of Bebbanburg into him, right? So
right.
that was a big inspiration for Liao Hua. So they came and said like it sounds there is a bit of Bernard Cornwell, and I love it. You know what, I'll take it for now. So this is my first novel. Please keep comparing it to those grandmasters of historical fiction, and in time I develop uh, my own mark in the genre. So no, for now I'm very happy if people find something they love from other writers. Yeah, no
That's
problem.
awesome. That's actually really cool. And now I actually have a few questions regarding the whole publishing process, which I find equally fascinating. So,
Mm.
Baptiste, are you considered a self-published author, or did you publish through like a publishing house?
No, I'm self-published, 100% self-published at the moment. Even more and more because now I'm doing my own formatting. I'm doing as much as I can by myself. Obviously, the cover is done professionally, the editing as well. But no, I'm self-published. I would love to go hybrid at some point. Like, I would really like to find a publishing house for my Vikings stories, my Scandinavian mythology stories, for example. But otherwise, no, self-published.
Yeah, and I actually think that's actually a very this is probably the very important discussion. I always like talking with my guests on this, especially learning their whole publishing process. So I can imagine you've probably come across your fair share of people messaging you or finding out you had a book published and wanting to offer you deals and kind of being very hesitant on who you want to publish through. And I
Mm.
want to know, have you ever come across what we say in like the States of vanity publishing?
Not really, to be honest. No, I didn't go come across a lot of vanity publishing or anything like this. Now, for a long time, so when I started writing, I was looking for traditionally publishing my books. So I even had an agent for a year and a half, maybe. But this was going nowhere, so I decided
Mm,
to go self-publish. So my agent was trying to find deals in for my Viking story. Didn't work,
right.
so I was like, all right, in that case, I'll self-publish on my side. But no, I didn't have I didn't come across vanity publishing or anything.
Nice. And what would you say you've learned through your self-publishing experience? Because it is different for a lot of authors, but
Mm,
it is. I think a lot of authors can agree who go the self-publishing route. It's 100% the author who is moving this vehicle, and it sometimes is cost expensive because it's like
mm,
the marketing is the author's responsibility, the publicity is the author's responsibility. Like everything is the
yeah.
author's responsibility, which can be a nightmare to first time authors. So when you went through that, how'd you kind of like keep like a calm and level head in the whole process?
Well, I knew it would require a lot of patience, which is not something I'm very good at to begin with. So every day it's about reminding yourself, do the work and be patient. Celebrate small victories, for example. That's something that I try to remind myself. Hey, you might not be a bestseller yet, but you're still selling every day. You're still uh, going on podcast. That's a very good victory as well. So um, that's one of the big thing I realized is it's going to be require a lot of time. It's going to require several books. It's one book is never going to cut it. So that's why, like, for in 2023, I plan to publish 4 books
Mm,
in order to get the machine rolling, right? And then I think one of the big lesson I learned is that you will go nowhere without the help of reviewers or people with a bit of weight in that industry. It doesn't have to be crazy big reviewers, but you need people on your side to push your
right.
books to readers who will not discover it without you. I was so lucky. I found 2 or 3 reviewers that basically found my book on Twitter just
Mm,
before it was released, like a week or 2 before its release, and they reposted it, and then they talked to me. We did some videos, and that really, you can see the bumps in the cells when reviewers share your work. Like, and you need to, but you need to do it in a friendly way, uh, and you need people to help you. Even though the whole self-publishing is a very lonely enterprise,
it is.
the marketing, the publicity around it has to be a team effort.
Definitely. And I also have to agree to in the self-publishing because I'm also in the process of
Hmm.
self-publishing as well. And just like you, I've had the opportunity to make a lot of friends, especially my friends
Yeah.
on Inkit, who have had my back 100% of like supported me, have like blasted me on social media to like, hey, support his works. And like getting my first novel off the ground, which is now in the final stages, it's taken me about almost 5 years to get it done. And I finished
Mm,
writing that in 2021, 2022. But it's a huge accomplishment. And then
mm,
to go through the whole publishing process, because yeah, just like you, I want to go through traditionally, but then finally realize maybe self-publishing is the best way. And you know
mm.
what? So far, it's been it's been very, very good. So another question I do want to ask you, which kind of goes back to the reviewers you've had. Um, besides those two reviewers that have really kind of elevated you, who have also been your biggest supporters in the indie author community that you've had the opportunity to meet and interact with?
There are a couple of writers that initially helped me a lot. So during the writing, or when I made the decision to go indie, 2 writers helped me a lot. The first is Brooke Allen. So she wrote Antonio's trilogy, which is a big hit for the past 2 or 3 years. So she has been very helpful with a lot of very good advice. And the second one is Ron Peake, who wrote the fantastic series Marching with Caesar, which is also one
Ooh,
of my big inspirations. So I've chatted with him a lot, and he gave me a lot of really good advices, a lot of good advice, sorry, about the self-publishing road. So yeah, in the community, those 2 helped me a lot at first, and now I'm lucky to have so many reviewers and booktubers helping me, and other writers. I keep talking with other writers as well all the time.
definitely, definitely, and that's actually pretty cool. You had the opportunity to make those connections,
Mm,
and sorry. Another question I did want to ask you, which is probably the most important one, which I think is equally important, is the story itself of the Three Kingdoms Chronicles, which is in the world of historical fiction, even I've looked at it from a consumer, there's
Mm,
not a lot of historical fiction drama stories that are set in either China,
mm.
Japan, even Korea or Southeast Asia. Why do you think, from your own personal experience, you think that that area of history doesn't get a lot of written talk about, as
Mm,
opposed to European history, specifically France, England, Spain, even Germany?
mm. That's a very difficult topic that I keep thinking about because I've loved Asian history and culture since I was a kid. So for me, it's always been a big pleasure of mine. But I can see like a lot of people don't connect with it as much. And I think it also comes from the fact that they are, it's a bit of a chicken egg situation here. Maybe people don't connect because there is not enough um, novels or stories written in a Western way. So they are not easy to appreciate those stories from a Westernist point of view. So that's why when I wrote Yellow Sky Revolt, I decided to write it as I would a Roman history novel or a Dark Age Europe novel. So the same voice, the same tone, in order for people to really connect with it. But like I remember having this debate, this question in my mind when watching the TV show Marco Polo. And
Right.
Marco Polo for me was such a great TV show.
Yes,
It
same.
was quality. Historically, it was awful, but the quality of
Yeah.
the TV show was amazing. And still, people didn't connect. And I think it's because the cast is mostly Asian. And even with the inclusion of Marco Polo, people didn't really connect as much
Hmm.
in the Western countries. And I think it's such a shame, like that. In order for a story, in order for people to love a story set in another culture, you need a central figure from your own culture. If you check uh, like all the Shogun by Clavel and all of this,
Yes.
you have a central figure who is from either Europe or US or they even did the movie 47 Ronin
Yes.
with Kenny Reeve in the center of the movie. They had to bring a whole story to put a European type character in a Japanese original, completely Japanese story, which makes no
Yeah.
sense to me. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie or a bad story.
No.
It's just it's too bad that we can't appreciate a story with uh, a roast of characters from another culture. So in Three Kingdoms Chronicles, I promise it's going to be 100% Asian cast, yeah, of characters.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've been thinking of for my other story too, which is called The Failed Quest. And that
Mm,
focuses on Japan during the it follows the main character, Akimoto Suji Akimoto, following the traditional Japanese name arrangement,
mhm,
who grows up during the beginning of the Sengoku Wars. He serves Oda Nobunaga all the way up to the Hojo Temple
Honnoji,
incident,
yeah. Mm,
and then he serves under Hideyoshi. All the while, he has a team which is probably the most, and this is just me playing with the idea of like seven people from around the world.
mm,
He has a Frenchman who served with the Ottoman Empire. He has a Dutch mercenary man. He has a Shaolin monk who is in exile. He
mhm,
has his brother, former Ming commander, who's in exile. You have Yasuke, the famous black
yeah.
samurai, who doesn't get captured, but he's rescued, so his whole fate's changed. You have a headhunter from the Philippines, and then you have a shinobi uh, from the Iga clan, and you follow their exploits all the way through the last part of the reunifications of Japan, and then all the way into the Imujin Wars. I believe that's how it's
Mhm.
pronounced. In
In
Korea, the
Korea,
first
yeah.
and second invasion, which ultimately collapsed the Ming. It devastated Korea, and it greatly damaged Japan. And
Mm,
I began working on that in high school back in, oh, I want to say 2014, and I'm still working on it. I haven't even broke even of the story, but yeah, I can completely agree. Like, trying to make this cast really, really
mm,
unique, but at the center point, the main character is Japanese, but he definitely has a secret. And I think if maybe you agree, if there is a story that's written in China or in Japan or in Korea, usually either the character is either half Chinese or half Japanese and half Korean or
Mm.
half European, or you have a, as with Keanu Reeves, you have a European or white character in the story in an era where he probably doesn't make sense, but he's supposed to represent the
Yeah,
audience.
it's just I feel like we need to trust readers to as well, a bit more
Hmm.
to connect with the culture that's not their own. I feel like
Right.
writers and maybe they feel like they need a central character that will discover the culture as the reader does. So like since the reader maybe doesn't know about ancient China, let's put a character that doesn't know the culture either, so that we discover this culture with the character. I didn't do this, but I used a child exactly for the same reason. So this
Right.
my main character is a kid in a farm, so he doesn't know much about the life outside of his community. He goes out
Right.
during the uprising and discovers a lot about ancient China as he grows up. So this way the reader does as well. It's just, yeah, it's too bad that we don't have more ancient Chinese, ancient Asia history. And I think Connie Goulden did it very well in the Conqueror series about Genghis Khan. Uh, even
Yes.
even though I've read since I love this series, but I've read since then that he bases his Mongolian culture on modern Mongolia more than what it must have been 1,000 years ago or 800
Right.
years ago.
And we've talked about through this interview like a lot of books that have impacted you. But if you had to name your top three books off the top of your head, what top three books would you say really push you to be the best you can be?
Huh. Books in themselves, well, like I said, first, I would say writers, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, go
Uh,
ahead.
yeah, so like I said, Bernard Cornwell is the number one. Saxon Stories and Warlord Chronicles are my greatest inspiration. Second one will be Giles Christian's Lancelot, and
Oh, okay.
so I say that's my second favorite books ever written, Lancelot, and the following one, which is Camelot. Now, this one is more fantasy side. It's a historical fantasy,
Hmm.
so I didn't use it so much for inspiration, except for one detail is that the main character in Lancelot is also a child, and this is something that I used to inspire my main character Liao Hua. Now, for the writing itself, I wouldn't say a book, but my main target, for me, the greatest writer in terms of style is Neil Gaiman. So now, Neil
Yes,
Neil Gaiman,
nice.
and I don't think I've enjoyed many books more than American Gods or Anansi Boys.
Hmm.
Sorry, Anansi Boys. So for me, those two books are probably the most beautifully written books I've read so far. Uh, I don't want to write like Neil Gaiman. I would just love to reach somewhere near his level at some point.
That's almost like me with Brian Jacques. Brian
Mhm.
Jacques has probably been my biggest inspiration for fantasy and world building, and his maps have always captivated me. And I made a
Mm.
promise, if I ever get a chance to write my own story, I'm going to include a map of my world so people can know what this
Mm.
world is like. And I think that really puts something for the viewer. I just said, like, we want to have the reader see what this world is and make their own um, opinion on it, and just allow them to just see in this world that we've created. And with all that said, looking back now with the success of Yellow Sky Revolt, and now with Heroes of Chaos, have you ever had that sense of validation from your peers saying that we like what you're doing, this is where you belong?
Yeah, I mean that happens quite. I wouldn't say regularly, but quite often that some writers that I really respect, either in the mostly in the self-published industry, um, told me they really loved my book and or they couldn't put it down, or some reviewers, same, like I have some reviewers who can be really tough in their reviews, and when they are about to release their
Hmm.
reviews of Yellow Sky Revolt, I get a bit spooked. I'm like, oh my god, what is it going to be? And actually they come back with like a 4 or 5 stars, and yeah, it validates a lot uh, my choice to publish my books. Now I'm very lucky. I never had this imposter syndrome so far.
Mm.
I didn't really have a doubt. This for me, this is my life. Uh, Writing is definitely what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So it's just a matter of finding all the readers now.
Nice. Yeah, that is often the struggle, finding the readers for this
It is.
book. uh, well, Baptiste, we're almost reaching the end, so we're now just going to go into the last few questions before the
Mhm.
closing segment. So the last two questions are, well, probably the most important ones. Um, First question is, um, what is your word of wisdom to the fellow authors out there? And have you ever thought, like in the deep recesses of like your own like private thoughts, have you ever imagined your life being different if you did not decide to pursue your passion for writing your series?
Mm. All right, I'll answer them in the other way around. So I'll start with the latter
Of
question.
course. Of
So
course.
yeah, no, things would be much different. I'm a very beginner in terms of writing, right? Like I self-published my first book 5 months ago, so in the publishing side, I'm really new, but uh, I can't go back now. It's so perfect to be a self-published writer. It's difficult. It's a learning. The learning curve is really steep, but so enjoyable. Every day you learn something if you really want to give it a serious shot. So I love creating content. I make videos. I have my YouTube channels. I'm helping friends with podcasts and all of this. But writing is so special, and I can't see myself not writing anymore. And having your book with your name on it in the hands of readers is such a special feeling. So if you hesitate to self-publish, if you're not sure, if you doubt your skills, your story, don't. Give it a shot. You have nothing to lose. Maybe a bit of money at first,
Right.
because it is a budget, but it doesn't have to be so massive anyway. But yeah, give it a try. That's my first idea, the first idea I want to bring. Now, really, my biggest advice to writers is trust your characters. This is something I've discovered. Every book I've written is, if you trust your characters, they will drive the story for you. They know where the story is going better than you do, no matter how much of a plotter you are. Um, so give them some space to grow, and they will bring the story where you didn't think it would. And then you have a lot of nice surprises along the way. So trust your characters. They know better.
Awesome. Well, listeners, we've reached the very end of this fantastic interview. Probably one of the best interviews I've had
Thank
so
you, Gabriel.
far. But before we end this wonderful session, Baptiste, where can people find and engage with you? And what sites can they purchase the Yellow Sky Revolt and your upcoming sequel follow up, Heroes of Chaos?
So to connect with me, the easiest is Twitter. I think you can find my handle is at Pinson Baptiste, so PINSONBAPTISTE. And never hesitate. If you want to have a chat, even if you haven't read my book, please drop a message in the DMs. No problem. Now my books are mostly on Amazon, I believe. So at first I expanded. I went quite wide, and then decided um, to stick to Amazon for the moment. So you can find Heroes of Chaos for pre-order on Amazon on Kindle, and Yellow Sky Revolt on Amazon as well for paperback and Kindle. Mm. Did I forget something?
Oh no, no, you got it. You got it. And I would also say, also people may not have Twitter.
Mm,
LinkedIn's also another place where people can
true.
contact you.
True. And I would also suggest, if you've read my book, so Yellow Sky Revolt, and enjoy it, please go check my website. I'm giving bonus chapters every 2 months. So while
Mm.
the main story follows the point of view of Liao Hua, every 2 months I'm giving free chapters from the point of view of secondary characters that that you have discovered in the books, so that you get more from this world of the Three Kingdoms Chronicles. Like, let's say, one character stayed behind while the story evolved. When with those bonus chapters, you know what happens to this character. So feel free to connect with me on my website as well. You can find it through my Twitter or LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, listeners, this concludes another fantastic interview today. I want to thank our wonderful guest joining us, Baptiste. Thank you so much for joining us. And this has probably been, as I said, a very, very great discussion. You can probably tell like the smile on my face, which I've had for the longest time. And it's really nice connecting with a interviewee that literally likes the same things as I do, from the same authors to the same
Periods of
history as well.
history. Yeah. No, thank you very much, Gabriel, for having me around. That was really fun.
Thank you. Well, listeners, this concludes our author interview. Again, thank you to our guests for joining us, and make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. And if you want to listen to the audio version, I will link that below so you can listen to it on Anchor. This has been the Scribe on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Signing out. Thank you and goodbye.